The wind never stopped in the town of Seven Rivers. It screamed down from the cliffs like something ancient and angry, rattling old window panes and stirring up red dust that stuck in your teeth. People who lived there learned not to talk too much. The wind carried secrets, and in Seven Rivers, secrets could kill you. The sheriff was dead. That much wasn't a secret. Everyone in town had seen what was left of Sheriff Amos Trigg after they dragged his body from the arroyo. His chest torn open like some wild animal had done the job. But no animal left a silver coin under the tongue. No animal branded a snake into a man's skin before killing him. That was a message, and Clara Hart read it loud and clear. Clara was no lawwoman. She didn't carry a badge, didn't sleep in town, didn't wear dresses or pray to anything except the rising sun. But when someone carved up the last honest man in Seven Rivers and marked the body with a symbol she hadn't seen in 10 years, she saddled her horse and rode in before the flies even cleared. She wore a coat stitched from buffalo hide and a bandolier across her chest. Her rifle was older than most of the buildings in town, but it still fired straight. As she dismounted outside the saloon, a stable boy took one look at her and ran. She didn't blame him. Clara hadn't set foot in Seven Rivers since the war ended, and even then, she hadn't exactly left on good terms. Inside the saloon, all eyes turned. The piano player stopped mid-note. A card game froze. The bartender, an old man with a crooked spine and milky eye, slowly reached under the bar. Clara held up her hand. "I ain't here for whiskey," she said. "I'm here for the one who killed Amos Trigg." Someone chuckled, then spat. "You and half the damn county, Hart. But that killer? He ain't hiding. He's waiting." Clara's eyes narrowed. "Where?" The man jerked his head toward the mesa. "Out there. In the rocks. With the rest of them." Them. The saloon went quiet again, and the bartender finally spoke. "Snake Brand." Clara felt her stomach turn. That name hadn't been spoken aloud since Cutter Ridge burned. Snake Brand wasn't a gang. It was a death cult wrapped in old cavalry coats and fed on blood and desert sun. They didn't rob for gold or cattle. They killed to cleanse, to balance the land. Their leader, Ezra Creed, was a former chaplain who'd gone mad after watching his regiment slaughter a village by mistake. He'd started preaching from the Book of Revelation and adding his own verses. Clara had killed him herself. At least, she thought she had. She'd put a bullet through his throat and left him for dead in the sands near Crossbone Gulch. But now, a coin in a corpse's mouth, a snake burned into skin. The signs were back. Outside, the sun began to fall behind the mountains, casting long shadows across the street. Clara stood on the edge of town, watching dust rise in the distance. 3 riders. Slow, deliberate. She didn't wait. She mounted her horse and rode straight for them. Because some ghosts don't haunt. They hunt. The 3 riders came down the wash like they had all the time in the world. Dust followed behind them in lazy curls. Each wore a black duster broad hat and a red cloth tied across the face. Not to hide, Clara knew. Just to show they weren't afraid. Their horses were lean and scarred, like they'd survived more than one fight without a master who cared much about feeding them. Clara pulled up on a flat rise just above the trail. She didn't bother hiding. She wanted them to see her. The first rider raised his hand. The others halted. He dismounted, moved slow, deliberate, like a man with a sermon in his throat. "Clara Hart," he said, voice calm as a funeral hymn. "Didn't expect to see you ride out alone." Clara rested her hand on her rifle, but didn't lift it. "You were expecting someone else." The man tilted his head. "No, just expected you'd bring the dead with you." Clara's jaw tightened. "You'll be joining them soon enough." The man didn't laugh. He stepped closer. The brand on his neck caught the light, a coiled snake around a burning eye. "Snake Brand, real as legend. You came to send a message," Clara said. "That's why Trigg's body was butchered. Why the coin? Why the mark?" The man nodded slowly. "We sent a message." "Well," Clara said, lifting the rifle to her shoulder, "here's mine." She pulled the trigger. The man dropped like a sack of rocks. The other 2 barely had time to shout before her second round punched through one's shoulder, and the third scrambled the last one's horse into a panic. The rider fled, clutching reins with one hand, blood trailing behind. Clara didn't chase. She wanted him to run. Wanted him to carry fear back to whoever was left. Back in Seven Rivers, the sheriff's office was still boarded up. Clara kicked in the door and found what she expected, a mess. Files scattered, wanted posters torn from the walls, a half-empty bottle of rye still uncorked on the desk. But underneath the floorboards, where Amos Trigg kept his personal cash, she found something more interesting. A journal. Old worn leather-bound. No name on the cover. Inside were notes in Amos's hand. Names. Dates. Symbols. He'd been tracking them. Even before the killing. Boone Rockledge, Miners Hollow. All towns burned or gutted in the last 3 months. All with signs of snake brand resurgence. And all with one name scribbled beside them in Trigg's handwriting. Creed. Clara stared at that name for a long time. She remembered Creed's voice, ragged and wild, as he bled in the sand. The land will remember. The bones will rise. She'd left him dying. She hadn't checked the pulse. Now it was her mistake to clean up. She stepped back outside as the wind howled down Main Street. The people of Seven Rivers were already locking up, shutters clacking like teeth. No one met her eye. No one wanted to know. But they would soon enough. Because this wasn't just about Trigg. And it wasn't just about Clara. It was about whatever Creed was planning, whatever sickness was still crawling through the hills. And she was going to ride straight into it. The Badlands to the north of Seven Rivers weren't mapped for a reason. They didn't follow logic. Trails would vanish overnight. Gullies that were shallow one day became bottomless the next. People claimed rocks whispered when the wind blew through them, like the land itself remembered screams. Clara Hart had ridden these canyons before. 10 years ago, chasing a man who called himself Prophet. Now she rode them again, hunting the ghost of her own failure. She didn't stop to make camp. She rode through the night, moonlight painting the land silver, rifle across her lap, eyes sharp. Her horse, a shaggy Appaloosa named Flint, didn't complain. He'd followed her into hell before. At sunrise, she found the bones. They were arranged in a circle. 30 or 40 skulls, sun-bleached, set in precise alignment. Some still had teeth. Others had carvings, strange symbols, spirals, a serpent's eye. In the center stood a wooden post with a fresh mark, a snake swallowing its tail. Creed's sigil. Clara dismounted. She walked slowly into the circle, eyes scanning the ground. No footprints. No blood. No recent disturbance. Whoever made this was long gone. Or watching from somewhere she couldn't see. She knelt by one skull and picked it up. It had a bullet hole in the forehead. Execution style. Behind her, Flint snorted. She turned fast, rifle raised. But it wasn't an ambush. It was a rider. Alone. A kid, maybe 16. Pale, skinny, sunburnt. No weapon in hand. Just a torn blanket over his shoulders and fear in his eyes. "You Clara Hart?" he asked. "Depends who's asking." "Name's Eli. From Miners Hollow." Clara lowered her rifle a hair. "That town burned last month." "I know," the boy whispered. "I was there." They sat by a dry creek while Eli told a story. How the snake brand came in the night. No demands. No robbery. Just slaughter. They nailed his father to the chapel door. Burned the blacksmith alive. Forced the others into the mine shafts and collapsed them. "I got out 'cause my brother pushed me through a vent," Eli said. "He didn't make it." Clara handed him a canteen. "Why come looking for me?" The boy looked at her like she was the last god in a dying world. "Because they said your name. Said you'd come back. Said they were waiting." Clara's jaw clenched. "They know I'm riding. They want you to." At dusk, they found the camp. A small canyon tucked between red stone cliffs, smoke rising from cook fires below. Clara counted at least 24 men. Some wore old uniforms. Some wore no shirts at all, just ash and blood painted on their skin. At the far end, raised on a wooden platform, stood a man in a black coat. Tall, still, face wrapped in white gauze. He raised his hands, and the men fell to their knees. "Is that him?" Eli whispered. Clara stared through the scope of her rifle. She remembered that posture, that madness, that voice that could bleed through bone. "Yeah," she said. "It's Creed." Clara and Eli waited until full dark. The canyon below lit with the flicker of firelight, casting monstrous shadows against the cliff walls. The cultists moved like ants around a hive, organizing crates, whispering prayers, sharpening blades. There were women among them now, too, some hooded, some armed, all marked with the same curling serpent. Creed's people had grown, not just in number, but in purpose. "They're not just killers anymore," Clara muttered. "They're building something." Eli, crouched beside her, kept his eyes low. "I saw a map in Miners Hollow. They were marking towns. 7 Rivers, Turley, Winslow, all along the old rail lines. Clara frowned. That's not raiding. That's strategy. A sudden chant rose from below, low and rhythmic, voices blending like a funeral dirge. From the shadows emerged Creed, still tall, still commanding, but his face, what was visible beneath the gauze, looked wrong, pale and stretched tight across bone. His right eye socket was sunken, flesh marbled with old burns. And yet, he moved like a man reborn. "My children," he boomed, voice echoing across stone, "the land remembers. The rivers run red with the sins of the forgotten. But tonight the bones speak." The crowd replied in unison. "The bones speak." Creed raised something above his head. A sheriff's badge, blood still clinging to it. Clara felt her stomach twist. "That's Amos's," she whispered. Creed continued, "We cleanse. We purge. And when the fires are done, only the faithful will remain." He crushed the badge in his hand, and the crowd erupted in cheers. Clara pulled Eli back from a ledge. "We can't stay. They'll be on patrol soon." The boy nodded, shaking. They mounted Flint and crept through the high trails, staying low, skirting loose rocks, and whispering only when needed. Clara's mind spun. Why the railroad towns? Why the ceremonies? Why collect bones? She remembered what Creed once told her, just before she shot him in the throat. "All kingdoms are built on the dead. I'm just honest about it." By the time they reached 7 Rivers again, the stars were fading. Boone was waiting on the main street, coat dusted, eyes tired, revolver on his hip. "Wasn't sure you'd make it back," he said. Clara dismounted. "I found Creed." Boone blinked. "Alive. Alive and preaching." She handed him a torn page from Amos Trigg's journal, taken from his office days ago. Boone read the notes, his brow furrowing deeper with every line. "It's a pattern," Clara said. "He's not just terrorizing. He's planning a movement. A territory." Boone looked up. "A kingdom." She nodded. "Built on blood." By sunrise, the town was stirring. Clara and Boone called a meeting. They gathered what was left of the sheriff's deputies, old ranchers, scouts, even barkeeps. She laid it out clean. Creed was alive. He had an army. He was targeting the towns along the old mining rail, places once united by war and then forgotten. "He's not raiding," she said. "He's recruiting. And if we don't cut him down now, there won't be a town left standing come fall." Boone spoke next. "We ride in 2 days. We take the canyon before he finishes whatever nightmare he's building." Someone asked, "And who leads this charge?" Everyone looked at Clara. She didn't flinch. "I do." Clara didn't sleep the night before the ride. She sat on the chapel roof, watching the stars fade into gray. Below her, the town of 7 Rivers stirred quietly. Boone had posted guards at both ends of Main Street. Eli slept curled in the hayloft above the stables, a pistol under his blanket, one eye always half open. At dawn, Clara strapped on her father's old revolver. The steel was heavy balanced, worn smooth by use. She hadn't carried it since the day she left Fort Sable in flames. Today it felt right. The riders gathered in silence. 15 in total, hard-faced men and women, most older, all tired. Boone rode up front, his horse dark and calm. Clara rode beside him, rifle slung across her back, eyes straight ahead. No banners, no speeches, just grit and loaded saddlebags. The townsfolk lined the street to watch them leave. Not one face was without fear. But as Clara passed, a little girl stepped forward and handed her a daisy. "For luck," the girl whispered. Clara tucked it into her coat. Luck would be welcome. They rode hard for a day and a half, cutting across dry washes and dead canyons, drinking from stale water holes, and sleeping in turns. On the second morning, they reached the ridge. Below Creed's camp. And it had changed. Where once there were scattered tents and scattered men, now stood a palisade of sharpened wood stakes and a central tower built from old railroad beams. Dozens of cultists moved in organized patterns, drilling in formation. Clara narrowed her eyes. "They're militarizing." Boone whistled low. "That's not a cult. That's a fortress." Eli scanned with a spyglass. "They've got crates, marked with Union seals." Clara's blood went cold. Old war stockpiles. They didn't attack that night. Instead, Clara took 2 scouts and circled wide. They found a dry tunnel through the canyon wall, an old mining shaft partially collapsed, but passable. It led straight into the heart of the camp, beneath the tower. Boone wasn't thrilled. If it caves, you're buried alive. If we don't take the tower, we're dead anyway, Clara replied. The plan was set. At dawn, they would strike. Eli approached her as she cleaned her rifle. You think we'll win? Clara didn't look up. We're not here to win. We're here to end it. Eli nodded slowly, then said, If I don't make it back, I want you to have this. He handed her a small brass locket. Inside, a photo of two boys, arms around each other. One was clearly Eli, the other older. Smiling. My brother, Eli said, the one who died in Miner's Hollow. Clara closed it gently. I'll carry him with me. The final hours before the fight were quiet. Boone smoked a cigar down to the nub. Others sharpened blades, tightened saddle straps, muttered prayers they hadn't said in years. Clara sat still, watching the horizon turn red with the coming sun. She whispered one word to the dust. Creed. They moved before the light crested the canyon wall. Clara led the tunnel team, herself, Eli, and 2 scouts from Turley, into the mine shaft's maw, lanterns hooded, breath held. The air inside was thick with rot and silence. The passage narrowed fast, ceiling scraping their backs, walls shedding dust with every step. Above them, Boone would wait for the distraction. He and the rest would ride hard into the outer camp, drawing the Colt's soldiers to the palisade walls. Just enough noise to make Creed look the wrong way. Just long enough for Clara to put a bullet between his eyes. The tunnel grew colder the deeper they went. Clara's boots struck something metal. She knelt. Rail ties. Old ones, half buried under collapse. This had once been a supply shaft, likely used by the Union during the final years of the war, when gold and coal kept soldiers alive. She placed her hand on the wall and felt it, vibration. Subtle, rhythmic. Not drums, not horses. Something pulsing. Eli stepped beside her. Do you hear that? I feel it. A tremor ran up her arm. Something ahead was alive. The shaft opened suddenly into a cavern. They doused their lamps and crawled forward until they could see it. A chamber carved by hand. Dozens of lanterns burned in oil-filled niches. Symbols were etched across the stone, serpents, circles, words in twisted Latin. And in the center, a pit, deep and lined with bones. Not scattered, but arranged, spines curled inward, skulls positioned upright. A ring of flame burned around it, fed by unseen fuel. And standing at the edge, Creed, alive, watching. I knew you'd come, he said without turning. His voice was unchanged, smooth, deep, heavy with something ancient. Clara raised her rifle. Turn around. He didn't. You were always my finest apostle. I'm not your anything, she snapped. Creed turned. The gauze was gone. His face was wrong, part man, part ruin. A hole where a cheek should be. I sunken but glowing. Yet he stood tall, unbent. The land rejected me, he said. But now it has opened again. I have seen the bones, Clara. I have listened. She stepped forward. Whatever you think you're building ends tonight. He smiled. You came alone. No, said Boone, stepping from shadows on the opposite side. Clara's heart kicked. Boone? In the chamber? He wasn't supposed to be here. Creed nodded slowly. I told you she'd come. And Boone? Boone didn't aim his weapon. He lowered it. I'm sorry, Clara, he said, but you never saw what I saw. You never listened to him. Clara's world dropped. You're with him. I never left. Eli shouted and raised his pistol. Boone shot first. The boy fell, clutching his shoulder, blood already soaking his sleeve. Clara dove behind a stone outcrop, fired at Boone, grazed his hat. Creed raised both arms. The flames roared higher. The bones in the pit shifted, and then the chanting began. From the tunnels, from above. Dozens of voices, low and unified. Bones rise. Fire cleanses. Land remembers. Creed stepped toward her, flames behind him. You can't stop it now. Clara gritted her teeth. We'll see. The chamber erupted into fire and gunfire. Clara dove sideways as Creed's cultists poured in from a far tunnel, half-naked, faces smeared with ash, blades in hand, voices echoing with that damned chant. Eli was still alive, crawling behind a stack of crates, bleeding but conscious. Clara snapped off 2 shots, hitting the first man through the entrance square in the chest. He didn't scream, just dropped like a puppet with its strings cut. Boone vanished into the chaos. Coward. Traitor. He'd sold them all to Creed's vision. She grabbed Eli and pulled him toward cover. You good? I will be, he grunted, pale but steady. You shoot straight. Straighter than Boone. Clara smirked grimly. Good answer. She tossed him her spare revolver and handed him a spare clip. The boy nodded, wiped blood from his cheek, and braced himself behind a fallen beam. The flames in the pit flared again, this time unnaturally. Blue and high. Clara turned toward Creed. He was chanting now, voice low and guttural, one hand raised over the bone pit. The skulls vibrated, shaking violently as if pulled by invisible strings. Cracks spread through the stone around them. And beneath it all, something moved. The ground buckled slightly. A groan. Deep. From below. Clara didn't hesitate. She broke from cover and charged. Cultists lunged at her, knives gleaming. She ducked the first, gut-shot the second, slammed the butt of her rifle into the third's jaw. Blood splattered. A blade grazed her side, ripping leather, not flesh. She pressed forward, feet skidding across dust and heat, eyes locked on Creed. He turned, smiled. You're too late. She didn't answer. She pulled the trigger. The shot rang through the chamber and hit Creed square in the chest. He staggered, but didn't fall. Blood soaked his robe. Still he stood, like something was holding him up from within. Clara fired again. Another hit. Still he smiled. Boone returned. From behind. Tackled her to the ground. They rolled, fists flying, guns lost in the dust. Boone had the advantage, size, strength, fury. He pinned her down, hand around her throat. You could have been part of it, he snarled. We could have built something true. Clara spat in his face, then drove her knee into his ribs and rolled him over. She found her knife and buried it in his side. Boone gasped, stared. No sermons, Clara said. Not from you. He choked once, then went still. Creed screamed. The skulls cracked open like eggshells. From inside, black mist, rising in slow coils, reaching toward the fire. The ground shook. The pit widened. Clara turned, grabbed her rifle, and sprinted toward the altar. If she couldn't kill Creed, she'd kill the whole ritual. She grabbed the oil flask from the supply crate, yanked the cork, and hurled it into the pit. Then fired. The explosion lit the cavern like a second sun. Skulls burst. Flames screamed upward. The cultists wailed. And Creed vanished into the light. When the smoke cleared, the pit was gone. Just ash and silence. Clara lay on her back, ribs bruised, hair singed. Eli crawled to her side, coughing. You dead? He asked. Not yet, she muttered. They looked around. Most of the cultists had fled. The rest lay still. Boone's body was gone. But Clara didn't ask how. They walked out of the mine at sunrise. Smoke trailed behind them. The wind was calm. And in the distance, the town of 7 Rivers waited. 7 Rivers didn't ring bells for heroes. When Clara and Eli rode back into town, there was no applause, no crowds waiting at the gates. Just the sound of boots on dry ground and shutters cracking open a sliver to see if the world had changed. Clara's coat was torn. Her hat was gone. Her rifle, soot-blackened, hung loosely over her shoulder. Eli's arm was in a sling made from a ripped saddlebag. They looked like survivors, not victors. Boone's betrayal still stung. Worse than any wound. Worse than Creed's madness. May Hollis met them outside the saloon. The barmaid had a pistol on her hip now, and her apron was stained with more than spilled drinks. You come back alone? She asked. Clara nodded. We ended it. May looked them over. At what cost? Clara didn't answer. She just walked past her, up the steps, and into the saloon. It was mostly empty. Just 2 drifters drinking watered-down whiskey and a sleeping dog in the corner. Clara went behind the bar, found a bottle with a label still intact, and poured herself a drink. Eli took a seat at the far end, laid his revolver on the table, and slumped forward like the fight had finally caught up to him. They didn't speak for a long time. That evening, the mayor called a meeting. Such as he was, old, half-blind, with a limp and a bad attitude. Clara stood in front of the townsfolk. 50 people, maybe less. She told them the truth. About Creed. About Boone. About what almost rose from that pit. She didn't embellish. She didn't soften. When she was done, the room was silent. Then a voice spoke up from the back. What now? Clara looked out the window. The wind had picked up again. Dust swirled down Main Street, like it always did. I don't know, she said. But if there's more out there like Creed, like Boone, we can't pretend they're just stories. The mayor cleared his throat. And what are you, Miss Hart? Clara met his eye. A reminder. Eli stayed. He took up work at the livery. Learned to shoe horses and mend saddles. He didn't talk much about what happened in that mine, but sometimes, when he thought no one was watching, he'd trace the edge of that locket he carried and look eastward. Clara stayed too, but not for long. 2 weeks later, a rider came from the next county. Brought news. Another town. Another massacre. Different symbol. Different words. But the same sickness. It was spreading. Clara packed her saddle that night. Eli met her by the edge of town. "You going alone?" "I always do." He held out a small bag. Ammo. A map. A flask of coffee. "You're not as alone as you think," he said. Clara nodded once, then rode into the wind. The desert swallowed her silhouette like it always did. But the people of Seven Rivers remembered. Not the fights, not the blood, but the way a woman stood at the edge of something monstrous and didn't blink. And when trouble came again, they'd know what to look for. Dust on the horizon, and the bones behind her. The town of Fairview didn't smell like smoke. It smelled like lavender and fresh-cut hay. The kind of place where wind chimes outnumbered bullets, and the general store still sold ribbons alongside bullets. That changed the moment Clara arrived. She rode in alone, hat low, eyes scanning every rooftop. The sheriff was gone. Missing 3 days, the townsfolk said. No note. No fight. Just vanished after visiting the North Bluffs, same place 2 young ranch hands disappeared last week. Clara stepped off Flint and tied the reins outside the old Grange Hall. People whispered. Same way they always did. She wasn't there for company. She was there for patterns. And Creed wasn't the only one who could draw maps in blood. Inside the Grange, the mayor of Fairview, a prim woman named Marjorie Tans, welcomed Clara with a mixture of hope and dread. We wired Fort Garland for help. They said Marshal Boone had already deployed someone. Clara's jaw tightened. Boone's dead. Marjorie's eyes went wide. Then who are you? The reason you're still breathing, Clara said. Marjorie didn't ask questions after that. Just handed over the last thing Sheriff Dalton wrote, half a page of scribbled symbols, barely legible, drawn in pencil on a page torn from the back of a hymnal. A spiral, a serpent, and something new, a circle of 6 stars around flame. That night, Clara climbed the bluff. The wind was stronger there, cold enough to bite. She found a campfire long dead. Boot tracks in the soil. A small, scorched patch of earth where something had burned for hours. Buried just beneath? A silver pendant. Simple. Old. Marked with the symbol from the paper. 6 stars circling flame. She pocketed it, then stood and scanned the dark hills, and saw the flicker of fire. Miles away. Too far for any torch. Too high for any lantern. It pulsed like a heartbeat. She returned to town and found Marjorie in the church. I'm riding tonight, Clara said. Keep your people close. Light no fires. If I don't return by dawn, leave. Where? Anywhere without bones in the ground. Clara didn't sleep. Didn't eat. Just rode. Toward the fire in the hills. And what she found wasn't a camp. It was a ruin. Old stone walls. Broken archways. Carvings so eroded by time that moss and memory blurred them into half-meaning. A chapel of some kind. Pre-war, maybe older. Built by hands long gone. In the center burned a fire, but not from wood. It burned from within the ground. From a stone bowl set into a platform covered in bones. And standing beside it, hood down, black robes draped in dust, was a woman. She turned as Clara approached. Clara Hart, she said. You know me. The woman smiled. Young. Too young. But her eyes were centuries old. I knew you'd come. Creed said you would. Before the fire took him. Clara lifted her rifle. This ends now. The woman didn't flinch. You haven't even begun. The woman stepped forward slowly. Not a threat, not a plea, something in between. Her robes dragged across the broken stone like whispers. The fire in the altar bowl crackled low and steady, casting shadows that made the bones around it twitch as if remembering movement. My name is Lydia, she said, voice soft as wind. I was Creed's pupil. His heir, he said, but even he didn't understand the depth of what he'd touched. Clara kept her rifle leveled. What is this place? Sanctuary, Lydia said, for those who remember, for those who listen. Listen to what? Lydia turned and gestured to the altar, to the land, to what sleeps beneath it. Clara's finger twitched on the trigger. I've buried cults. I've burned symbols. Whatever you think you're summoning, it ends here. Lydia didn't move, didn't blink. You think fire and bullets end faith? Creed was just the beginning. His mind cracked because he only glimpsed the truth. But I've seen the bones move, Clara. I've heard them speak. Clara fired. The round struck Lydia in the shoulder. She fell back, hit the stone hard. Didn't scream. Didn't bleed. She stood again. And Clara saw the truth. Her wound smoked. Black smoke. And beneath it, no flesh. Just charred bone. Wrapped in skin that wasn't quite real. Clara backed up. What the hell are you? Chosen, Lydia said. Her voice no longer soft. No longer hers. Something deeper echoed in it, like a second presence speaking through the cracks. They sleep under the valleys. Under towns like yours. Every town built on graves. 7 Rivers. Fairview. Boone's Folly was believing in borders. The bones don't care for maps. The fire flared. The ground trembled. Clara turned and ran. She reached Flint and rode hard, never once looking back. Behind her, the ruin pulsed with unnatural light. Birds scattered from the trees in every direction. The moon vanished behind clouds that weren't there minutes before. By the time she reached Fairview, the townsfolk were already gathering torches. "Trouble?" asked Marjorie. Clara dismounted and grabbed her by the shoulders. "Get everyone underground. Church cellar, root cellars, storm drains. Anywhere deep. And stay there." Marjorie nodded and turned to shout orders. Clara leaned against the stable wall, breathing hard, heart pounding. Her bullet hadn't worked. Lydia was something else. Not Creed. Not a man driven mad. Something older. Worse. And if she was building something beneath this land, piece by piece, symbol by symbol, Clara would need more than a rifle. She'd need allies. At dawn, she wired a message from the telegraph office. To E. Hart. From Clara. Stop work. Bring every gun you can find. Hell's digging through the floorboards. C. She sent a second one. To Marshal's Bureau, Fort Raven. Shadow Daughter. It's starting again. Send whoever's still alive. Then she saddled up again. Because waiting, that wasn't what Clara Hart did. The desert between Fairview and Raven's Ridge was no man's land. Old wagon trails etched into sun-baked clay like veins. Dry riverbeds twisted like scars. Nothing grew but cactus and regret. Buzzards circled overhead, waiting for the next mistake to die. Clara rode hard, dust in her teeth, sun at her back. Her eyes never left the horizon because she wasn't riding toward safety. She was riding toward a man she swore she'd never see again. Ezra Hart, her brother. They hadn't spoken in years. Not since Ezra walked away from their father's grave without saying a word. Not since Clara left the Marshals behind, too burned out by war to pretend justice came from a badge. But Ezra? He'd kept the badge, and built something mean out of it. The last Clara heard, he ran a mercenary outfit called the Dead Iron Syndicate. They cleaned out bandit towns, ran protection on mining caravans, and weren't afraid to charge triple when blood was guaranteed. But Ezra didn't fear the dead, because he'd seen worse. Just like Clara. She found them camping in an old stagecoach depot, now half collapsed and covered in thorn brush. 12 horses, twice as many guns, and men who looked like they'd buried friends without blinking. Clara dismounted and walked in alone. One of the guards raised a rifle until he saw her face. Then he whistled. "Boss," he called, "we got a ghost." From inside the depot, Ezra Hart stepped out. Same coal-black coat, same black Stetson, but more lines around his eyes now. He looked her over, arms crossed. "Well, I'll be damned," he muttered. "Clara Jane rides again." She didn't smile. "I need you." Ezra raised a brow. "That's new." Clara tossed him the pendant from Fairview, the 6 stars around a flame. He caught it, frowned. His tone changed. "Where?" "Everywhere." She told him about Creed, about the snake brand returning, about Boone's betrayal and the bones under 7 Rivers, about Lydia, and what was waking under the earth. When she finished, Ezra didn't speak for a while. Then he called to his men. "Saddle up. We ride before the sun sets." They rode 30 miles west to a canyon shaped like a broken jaw. Clara remembered it from childhood, a hiding place, once. Now it was a war camp. Men in hardened leather stitched with iron rivets. Explosives. Gatling mounts. Smoke bombs packed in oilskin. Ezra's idea of diplomacy. Clara watched from her eyes as the troops prepared. You believe me now, she asked. Ezra adjusted the scope on his repeater. I believed you before. I just didn't want to. At dusk, a rider approached the canyon. Alone. Wrapped in gray. No weapon drawn. A message. Ezra let him through. The man dismounted. Face painted white. Black tears under each eye. He bowed before Clara and handed her a scroll. She unrolled it. Symbols. Old ones. Same circle. Same stars. And 3 words written in blood. The veil thins. She looked up, but the rider was already gone. Vanished into the dust. At high noon, the earth opened. Not a crack. Not a tremor. A wound. South of Sundown Rock, in the dust bowl where the old mine shafts collapsed years ago, the ground buckled and split in silence. No roar, no quake. Just a gentle sagging like breath being exhaled, and then a pit yawning wide, swallowing dry brush, stone, and the bones buried below. Clara stood at the ridge, watching, waiting. This is it, she said. Ezra nodded. Behind them, 30 hardened riders tightened reins and checked cartridges. No banners. No battle horns. Just purpose. They rode at dusk. The wind had died completely now. No birds. No insects. No sound but the hooves and the breathing of men who already smelled blood. As they neared the pit, Clara saw the figures. Dozens of them, standing around the rim. Hooded. Still. Waiting. Not speaking. The cult had grown. They didn't carry guns. They didn't need to. Clara raised a hand, and the riders halted. I go first, she said. Ezra cursed under his breath. You're not invincible, Clara. No, she replied, but they think I am. And then she rode alone, toward the pit, toward Lydia. The high priestess stood at the edge, robes black as oil, arms outstretched. Clara dismounted and walked forward, boots crushing ancient bones like dry leaves. Lydia smiled. I told you we would meet again. Clara didn't draw, didn't flinch. You've been hiding in holes long enough, she said. Why now? Lydia gestured to the pit. To rise, one must first dig deep. Clara's hand hovered near her holster. Let's skip the poetry. But Lydia only laughed. You still think this is about me? About Creed? We're vessels, Clara. The land chose us. You think it didn't choose you. Clara frowned. What do you mean? Lydia stepped closer. The wind returned, barely a breeze. It carried dust. And something else. The sound of chanting. Not from the mouths of cultists. From beneath the earth. Lydia's voice lowered. You feel it, don't you? That pull in your blood. The memories that aren't yours? That isn't fear, Clara. It's recognition. Clara's heart pounded. She'd felt it before. In the mines. In the pit. In the fire. Not fear. Something older. Something familiar. She raised her gun. Lydia opened her arms. Shoot. And you shoot yourself. Clara fired. The bullet struck Lydia square in the chest. She flew back, hit the ground. Clara ran forward, but stopped. Lydia wasn't bleeding. She was cracking. Her skin split like dry porcelain. And from within, something darker began to emerge. Not a woman. Not a spirit. A shape. Too large for her frame. Too old for this world. And from the pit, voices screamed. Not aloud. In her head. Ezra shouted from behind. Clara! Get back! She turned. The cultists were charging now, no weapons, just rage. Her riders fired. Lead tore through the field. Clara lifted her revolver and emptied it, then pulled her knife. Because some fights didn't end with bullets. They ended with blood. The battle at the pit wasn't a battle. It was a reckoning. Ezra's riders held the line, forming a crescent around the mouth of the chasm. Their rifles cracked like thunder, echoing off stone, tearing into the oncoming wave of cultists. But the cult didn't fight like men. They didn't scream. Didn't break. They walked into bullets like they were already dead. And some of them were. Clara moved through them like lightning. Knife in one hand, Colt in the other, kicking knees, slashing throats, dodging hands that clawed like bone branches. Blood soaked her coat. Dust filled her lungs. She didn't slow. Couldn't. Not while Lydia still moved. Not while that thing beneath the surface kept whispering her name. From the center of the pit, a shape began to rise. Tall, crooked, black as coal and veined with glowing red light. It wasn't human. It wasn't even alive. It was memory given flesh. The collective mourning of 100 massacres, 1,000 graves. It had no face, but its many mouths chanted in unison. Return. 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 Clara felt the words under her skin, in her bones. Ezra was bleeding now, shoulder grazed, left leg limping, but he kept firing. "Clara," he roared, "we can't stop that thing." "You don't," she shouted back. "You trap it." He understood instantly, gestured to his men, circled a pit, charges on the ridge line. They scrambled, dropping satchels of dynamite and powder canisters along the soft edges. The plan was madness. So was the world now. Lydia rose again, her body half unmade. Her face cracked like porcelain, revealing glowing bone beneath. "You can't bury what was never born," she said. Clara tackled her. They rolled into the dust. Fists. Elbows. Blood. The pit's light flared around them. Clara pinned Lydia down and drove her knife deep into her chest. Not once. Not twice. But again. And again. Until Lydia stopped moving. Until her body crumbled to dust. But the pit still pulsed. The thing still rose. The voices still spoke. Ezra limped to Clara's side. "They're set." She looked to the dynamite. Nodded. "I'll light it." "Not alone." He struck the match. She held it to the fuse. The fire hissed along the wires. And Clara looked down into the pit. At the thing. At the memory of everything that hurt. Everything they'd lost. "Go to hell," she whispered. Then ran. The explosion tore through the canyon like judgment. Stone rained from the sky. Flames roared high enough to scorch the clouds. The ground caved in on itself. The cult screamed and were silenced. The pit closed. The light vanished. And silence returned. Clara woke half-buried, coughing blood. Her arm broken, but alive. Ezra knelt beside her, face smeared with ash. "You good?" "No, but breathing." "Barely." They laughed, because there was nothing left to cry about. The smoke took 3 days to clear. What remained of the pit was nothing more than scorched earth and a crater half a mile wide. Bones littered the rim, some human, some not. And at the center, a single, twisted remnant of the altar, blackened but upright, as if refusing to vanish completely. Clara sat on the edge of the crater, arm in a splint, ribs wrapped tight. Ezra stood beside her, silent, sipping from a flask. Neither spoke. Not at first. There weren't words for what they'd seen. Only silence and the understanding that something ancient had stirred and something older had gone back to sleep. For now. Ezra finally broke the quiet. "You think it's over?" Clara looked out over the wreckage. "No." She tossed a stone into the crater. It bounced once, then was swallowed by the ash. "There'll be more," she said. "Always more." Ezra nodded. "Then we keep burning it down." She glanced at him. "You're staying." "For a while." He looked east, toward the towns that hadn't fallen yet. "They'll need someone. Someone who knows what bones look like before they rise." Clara almost smiled. "Try not to scare the school teachers." No promises. The survivors, what few remained, came from the hills by 2s and 3s. People who had escaped Fairview or fled from towns too small to name. Most had no weapons, no homes. But when Clara walked through them, they stood straighter. Not because they believed in her, but because she had survived. And that was enough for now. She stayed one more night. Long enough to mark Lydia's name in the Book of Ashes, an old leather ledger she found near the altar, miraculously untouched by fire. She added Creed's name beside it. And Boone's. And one more. Unknown. Beneath. She closed the book, tied it shut with iron wire, buried it deep. Let the earth keep its secrets. At dawn, Clara mounted Flint and rode west. Ezra watched her go, without speaking. She didn't look back. Didn't wave. She had places to be. Letters to deliver. Warnings to give. And a list of towns she needed to reach before the bones beneath them started to whisper again. In the distance, a storm rolled over the horizon. Not rain. Not thunder. Dust. But Clara rode into it anyway. Because fear was never a reason to stop. Coldridge was colder than its name. The wind came down the mountain like a warning, sharp and thin, rattling signs, creaking shutters, and whispering through pines like a language older than men. The town sat in a crooked bowl of stone and snow, its main street sunken like a wound. Clara rode in slow. Saw no welcome. No children. No dogs. Just shadows behind glass and door hinges that hadn't moved in days. The town was silent but not empty. It was waiting. She tethered Flint outside the mining office. The The sign hung sideways, bullet holes in the wood. Inside, it smelled like mold and memory. On the wall, maps. Not of veins or tunnels, but of bones. Someone had charted the underground dead. Every skeleton exhumed by miners. Every burial site forgotten. And at the center of it all, beneath Coldridge, a spiral, not just in shape, a tunnel, descending, winding, endless. Ezra arrived at dusk. 3 riders with him. The others had stayed behind. Coldridge, he said, pulling off his gloves. Clara nodded. Rotten to the root. He looked at the maps. Then at her. How deep? Deeper than 7 rivers. He cracked his knuckles. So we burn it down. Clara shook her head. Not yet. We see what they're hiding. Then we burn everything. They found the entrance behind the chapel. An old mine elevator, half-rusted, cables humming. Still working. Clara stepped onto the platform. Ezra joined her. The others lit lanterns. Last ride down, someone muttered. The elevator groaned. Then sank. For 10 minutes, they descended in silence. Wooden walls passed by like coffins stacked high. Symbols scratched in soot, serpents, stars, spirals. Then darkness. The lanterns flickered. Below them, the shaft opened into a cavern. Massive, silent, and full of bones. Thousands of them, stacked like bricks, carved with names, painted in ash. In the center, a throne, built of femurs and rib cages and crowned with skulls. And on it, a figure, still, wrapped in white, face hidden. Not Lydia, not Creed. Older, worse. Ezra raised his gun. The figure stirred. Welcome home, it said, voice dry as stone. Clara stepped forward. I'm not yours. The thing's head tilted. But you carry the dust. You speak its name. And the bones remember you. Then the walls began to move. Not from outside. From within. Hands. Dozens. Hundreds. Reaching. Grasping. Bones that had never rested. Ezra shouted. Fired twice. The bullets vanished in midair. Clara turned to the figure. Tell me what this is. The thing stood. Tomb. Womb. Altar. Clara stepped back and realized something terrifying. This wasn't the root. This was the seed. The seed spoke without moving its mouth. Every town built on graves. Every road paved in bones. You think this land belonged to you? Clara stepped forward, revolver drawn. No one owns the land. But you don't get to raise the dead to claim it. The figure's shroud slipped. Beneath wasn't a face. It was a mass of ivory, skulls fused, teeth too many, eyes hollow and endless. You misunderstand. We are not raising the dead. We are remembering them. Ezra fired. The bullet struck the thing's chest. It absorbed the shot like it drank it. The light dimmed. The bones around the chamber began to rattle. Like breath. Clara turned to the miner's tunnel, the one leading deeper. She understood now. This wasn't where the story ended. This was where it was born. The bones weren't the enemy. Not entirely. They were tools. Memories. Fuel. And something, was digging for something worse. A god beneath memory. A voice beneath voices. The root wasn't a place. It was a name. Clara turned to Ezra. We go deeper. You're out of your damn mind. We always were, she said. They ran. Behind them, the seed screamed, not in pain, but in warning. As if it hadn't expected her to understand. As if it feared her now. That was good. She wanted it to fear. The tunnel narrowed. Heat rose from below. Like the earth was breathing out centuries of sorrow. They reached a cavern lined with red stone, walls etched with stories older than language. War. Fire. Starfall. A gate. And at its center, a cage. Made of roots. Bones. Iron twisted by flame. Inside it, a heart. Not beating, but pulsing. Glowing. Calling. Clara stepped closer. The others stayed behind. What is it? Ezra called. She didn't answer. Because she knew. It wasn't a heart. It was a seed. The real seed. This wasn't just where the dead gathered. This was where something waited to be born. And if it woke, there would be no more towns. No more names. Only dust. She pulled out her last satchel of dynamite. Lit the fuse. Ezra stared in shock. You're not walking away from this. Clara smiled. No, but you are. She shoved the satchel under the cage, turned and ran. The cavern roared behind her. The fuse screamed. The explosion was not fire. It was memory erased. The cage shattered. The walls collapsed. And with it, the voice stopped. Clara crawled out of the collapsing tunnel seconds before it sealed behind her. Ezra dragged her away as the earth swallowed itself. For a long time, they lay there, breathing, bleeding, alive. The mountains didn't collapse. They exhaled. The explosion didn't destroy Coldridge, it unmade it. When the dust cleared, the town was gone. The chapel, the mines, the rail lines, all erased. In its place, a hollow, a wound in the land. Nothing grew. No birds returned. It was as if the earth had reached up and swallowed its own shame. Clara stood at the edge of that wound, coat torn, hat lost, boots soaked in ash. Ezra leaned on a broken fence, shoulder bandaged, cheek bruised. Neither of them spoke for a long time. Because what do you say when you've ended something the world never wanted to admit existed? They buried the others who didn't make it. Simple graves. No names. Just stones. But Clara said words anyway. Even if no one answered. Even if the bones below had stopped whispering. She said them to remember that silence was earned. The next day, Ezra found her packing her saddle. You leaving already? She tightened the cinch. There's always another town. You sure? He asked. We bought a few months, maybe a year. Whatever was down there, whatever they were growing, it's gone. Clara looked to the horizon. Flat. Empty. Endless. No, she said. It just moved. Ezra handed her a small notebook. Leather-bound. Scorched. She opened it. Inside, Lydia's symbols, Creed's patterns, maps half-burned. One last note in Ezra's hand. Watch the rivers. They remember first. She looked up at him. You believe it's coming back. I believe things don't end just because we want them to. She nodded once. Climbed onto Flint. Ezra stepped back. If you need me? She smirked. I always do. Then turned and rode west. Behind her, the wind picked up. No chanting. No fire. Just the whisper of dust across broken stone. The land remembering. The bones resting. For now.